Coming up this afternoon on the Dattitude podcast, can you believe they let me on Radio Row? They did. We're here to talk about the Super Bowl. What else? The Saints coaching search, of course, and maybe even a little bit about the most insane trade I've ever seen in the NBA. Can you say fixed? I said, can you say fixed? I didn't say I was saying fixed. And could I possibly be opening up to the thought of Jackson's dart in the first round? Man, someone must have used the X-ray machine on my brain this morning when I was getting scanned in. I better get rolling before I say something else like silly, like let's just roll with the rat. Gabe, Zach Ewing, and who else? Who knows who else is coming on this afternoon? And it's coming up now.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.
Where you at, Dattitude family? We are on Radio Row here at the home of Super Bowl 59 in the Morial Convention Center. About to get started with a week's full of craziness. It is already nuts inside of here. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on inside of Radio Row. When I tell you this is bigger than I think anybody's ever seen, I'm not exaggerating with what's going on here this morning, but you're all going to be a part of it, a part of Dattitude episode number 340, presented by Evangeline Securities for a Monday, February the 3rd, 2025. I'm your host, Jim Derry, as you know that already, 34 and a half years on the New Orleans sports media scene, and maybe no bigger scene than this, what we have here this week coming up. Media night is coming up at the Dome. Kansas City Chiefs, Philadelphia Eagles, Patrick Mahomes, Saquon Barkley. It's all coming up. You can be on Radio Row. Just type in your comment or question. You can do that, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, or however you're watching. It's going to be an interesting week here for sure. We're going to have all kinds of surprise guests. We're going to have maybe some things will work, maybe some won't. You see that I'm not using my headphones this morning? When I have a virtual guest, I'm going to have to. But we're trying to figure everything went smoothly for Saints Insider, but apparently the equipment that I use isn't quite measuring up to the incredibly improved equipment that the Saints Insiders use. So we'll see how things go on. We hit a little echo. So when Gabe comes on later on, we'll find a way to talk to one another. Zach's going to be here in a little bit, maybe a couple of the Saints Insiders. Tomorrow we're going to have Adam Chernoff. Y'all know Adam Chernoff. He is the number one. When you're talking about gambling and betting perspective, there's no one better on the planet than Adam Chernoff. He's going to come on the show tomorrow. Wednesday, I know we're going to have Larry Holder on the show. We're also going to have the vice president of Caesars is going to come on the show, Caesars Sportsbook, and talk to us about how the lines have moved. And you know what? They haven't really moved and why they've moved to where they are. But you are a part of the show as we have some of our regulars here this morning. Good morning, Gary. Good morning, Rocky. Good afternoon. I'd say good morning. I'm just used to saying good morning. It's afternoon. Good afternoon, S. Callie, and let's go. We are going. Again, just type in your comment, and we'll talk about it. I'm going to probably lead with the Saints this morning. Before we get to all that, you know what I got to get to. We got to get to business. Let me tell you a little bit about our friends at Evangeline Securities. Of course, they are a company that can help you decide if it's the right time to sell your family-run or privately held business. And just as importantly, they can help you figure out what that business is worth. If that's you or someone you know, it's time to reach out to Evangeline's founding and managing partners, Nick Braden and Ron Hemelt, who are the Patrick Mahomes and Saquon Barkley of the securities companies here in the Southeast. There's no doubt. There are very few like them around here. They will start by scheduling a complimentary valuation from their offices, either on Poydras Street, which is just down the street, I think that way. You know what I mean. Or in Lafayette. From there, you will be well informed to begin to make the decision on if you want to proceed. What happens after that, we'll fill you in more later in the show. In the meantime, you can check them out at www.evangelinesecurities.com. All right, let's talk a little bit about, obviously, we're going to spend a lot of time this morning talking about the Super Bowl. and some intricacies about the Super Bowl. And I'm going to get into that with Zach later. I think Gabe and I will probably talk a little bit about the crazy trade in the NBA. But I'm going to open up with the Saints coaching search if y'all want to get in on that this morning. John Pace. Hello, John. Owen Attilio. Good afternoon. And who that daddy is here? Everybody's here. Yeah, it was quite the interesting weekend. The Derry household celebrated as I don't know. You know what? I don't think I did tell you. I think I said it on my game broadcast on Saturday, but it's my 17th wedding anniversary on Saturday, and how someone's put up with me for that long is kind of amazing. So shout out to my wife, Drea, who's riding around New Orleans right now trying to make sure that all the restaurants get the food so they can feed all these people from out of the state, out of the city. It's not too crazy yet here on Radio Row, but it sure will be in a little bit. Corey Terrio is present. Brian Cabot, who dat? You watched me on the Nola Insider Pod earlier today. I was on there with Zach. Now, listen, I see a couple of y'all talking about the email and this scandal with the Saints that broke again this morning, the incredibly well-timed emails. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go on to NOLA.com and find it. You can go to social media and find it. Not going to spend a lot of time talking about that this afternoon. We will talk about it a little bit probably when Zach comes on. We talked about it on the Insider Pod, which was on before me. And by the way, the Saints Insider Pod will be on every day this week. The rest of the week, I think they're going to be on from 9 a.m. until approximately somewhere between 11 and noon. And then we're going to be on tomorrow and Wednesday for sure. We'll be on at 1 p.m. Haven't made a decision about Thursday yet. Friday, I think we'll be back in our home studio on Friday. We'll see how it goes. I see that the Eagles are making their way. Got the NFL Network on. Media night is tonight. We're going to have some video hopefully for you on tomorrow's show about all that. Yeah, so anyway, if you're typing in comments about the email stuff, we're just not going to talk about it, at least not right now. We will touch on it later on with Zach, but that's about it. The Saints coaching search, look, it's kind of the same boat that we were talking about at the end of last week. And as I told Zach earlier, silence tells you a whole lot, right? I mean, if there is silence, it means they're not talking to anyone else. Because if the Saints were talking to anyone else or doing another interview with Anthony Weaver or even talking to Darren Rizzi some more, Darren Rizzi wouldn't be leaking that he's thinking about going to Denver and being the special teams coach for Sean Payton. No, the Saints haven't talked to anyone. So it's Kellen Moore. And I know there were some rumors that we kind of touched on about what Diana Rossini said in her podcast on, I believe, Thursday evening, or it must have been Thursday evening because we talked about it on Friday morning show. She talked about that maybe Kellen Moore was having some second thoughts. But the interesting part of that is she didn't talk about that until the 24-minute mark of her podcast. So, and Chase Daniel, when she started saying that, he was kind of like, I don't really know if that's the case or not. So I found that interesting. Apathy. Well, I get to ask Kellen Moore any questions at Media Day. That's a very good question, Apathy. If I don't, you can bet your sweet bippy that someone will be asking Kellen Moore about whether he's going to the Saints or not. It'll probably be asked every way you can imagine it. I'm not going to have to ask it. I will be there. I will be recording some things. I'm sure our people here at NOLA.com, Norman's with me, sitting right across from him to make sure that I don't screw anything up or pull any cords out, and making sure that we got the right camera working. And all of our people here on Radio Row, someone's going to ask him the question, whether it's us or someone else. So that's going to come in for sure. So don't worry. It'll be asked. Again, probably 10 different kinds of ways when he doesn't answer it. Dylan Smith, good afternoon. It is a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day in New Orleans as well. I'm wearing a sweater. When I left the house in the north, it was about 52. It's about 72 now. I should have wore a better shirt to wear underneath it that I could pull this thing off. Who knows? Let's see. Corey says, well, the coaching gig didn't last long. Showed up, ate breakfast, and then they kicked him out. Said he eats too much. I hear you, Corey. I'm surprised they didn't kick me out. We got wings all over the place up here. I took a walk upstairs. It's an interesting setup. So I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen by the time we get off the air before we catch a shuttle and go to the Dome later on. I know that Roger Goodell, your favorite person on the planet, right? Roger Goodell. He is going to be doing his press conference, I believe, at the Dome at 3 p.m. I probably will not be there for that. But Kellen Moore, look, I think at this point, most fans have accepted it. I'm not sure that everyone is in love with this pick. You talk about someone that's 36 years old, and I get that it's hard to fall in love with the pick. And what has he done? He's worked for Mike McCarthy, a guy that, a lot of Saints fans that aren't thrilled about anyway when he was talked about him potentially being the head coach. He worked for an awful head coach in Brandon Staley. I think Gabe's okay with me even using the word awful when you talk about Brandon Staley, right, Gabe? Yeah, okay. We're trying to lay off of awful, but he's okay with that when you're talking about Brandon Staley, who, by the way, would be rumored to be the defensive coordinator in New Orleans. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that, but you got to take what you can take. So there are lots of things to be excited about when you're talking about Kellen Moore, and there are lots of things that maybe make you think twice. And overall, he's done his numbers don't lie. I mean, he's finished first in the NFL in total offense in 2 years of him being an offensive coordinator. This year, the Eagles had the number 2 rushing offense in the NFL. And now, granted, when you got Saquon Barkley and you got Jalen Hurts, and the only one that was better was Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, duh. But, one thing that Kellen Moore was criticized before, and especially his time in Dallas, was that he never wanted to run the ball. Mike McCarthy said he just wanted to, quote, light the damn scoreboard up. First of all, what's wrong with lighting the damn scoreboard up? But secondly, he showed that he has versatility. He leaned on Saquon Barkley this year. And even more so, now that we're in the playoffs, Saquon Barkley has been the man, and Saquon Barkley is going to be the one that actually gives the Eagles the chance. When we get to making our picks, which I think we're going to do on Wednesday, we'll see how that goes, but I think it's going to be on Wednesday on the show. I've already sent mine in. Do you pick God like you always do? Or do you pick, no, the Eagles are better because they got Saquon Barkley. It's the same team. Maybe the offensive line isn't quite as good. It's going to be a tough choice. Maybe I'll surprise some people. Maybe I won't. Apathy says Schefter pretty much said on the Pat McAfee show that he's going to be the coach barring some really crazy setback about an hour ago. I mean, I don't think there's any way you could think it's anyone else. So what would he bring to New Orleans? Is he going to work well with Derek Carr? Here's another thing, another rumor mill that's been out there all weekend long that we need to shut down. Talking about how that potentially Kellen Moore could be excited about maybe sitting Derek Carr. Let's sit the $50 million quarterback on the bench and go with Spencer Rattler. First of all, anyone who's watched this show more than once knows how I feel about that. Second of all, that ain't happening. But the question is, as Derek, because it's pretty easy after this coming year to get rid of Derek Carr. You go through this year as long as you don't try to split that salary up, and because the Saints have 2 options when it comes to, well, they have 3. There are only 2 realistically when you're talking about Derek Carr. You either play him as your quarterback this year. He cost you $50 million. You eat the $50 million and you use him as your quarterback, and Kellen Moore hopefully can get what he wants to get out of Kellen Moore. Or you can cut that salary up. You can spread it out over the course of the salary cap hit over the course of 2 seasons. But then you get back into talking about kicking the can down the road again. And I know that's not what anyone wants to do. So I think that's a very unlikely option. Or post-June 1 cut saves you, I believe it's like $26 million if you cut him after June 1st. I just don't see that happening. So to me, the only logical explanation is going to be, Gabe says that Staley's a good DC. Okay. So the only logical option when it comes to Derek Carr is going to be keeping him and using him for at least a year. Brian says Carr will be good as long as he has a new line, which leads me to where you're going as far as draft. And when you're talking about in the draft, I mean, Zach and I have talked about this many times. He's going to come on in just a minute. I'm sure it'll come up again. But assuming that it's going to be Carr, you've got to get him at least one more piece. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the first round. But I think the Saints are in a position to where you got to go in the trenches the first 2 rounds. If you want to draft a defensive lineman first, and you want to draft an offensive lineman, I'm okay with that. I'd rather see the O-lineman first. But maybe you're thinking offensive guard. Maybe you do that in the 2nd round. Maybe even the 3rd round. So we're going to talk about that. Let's see. Apathy says, no way unless Rattler can show me 4 reads and make an accurate throw with anticipation. And that's the problem that I had with him. I mean, the problem that we've talked about with Rattler on the show before, and why I don't think that if it is Kellen Moore, why he would go in that direction, besides the money part of things, is that in his 0-6 run, even when he was at his best, and look, he made some throws that I think only a handful of, there were maybe 4 or 5 throws throughout his little ride there where he made, and I'm like, I don't think there's 5 other quarterbacks in the NFL that can make that throw. The problem is he is, from what I've seen, 80% of the time going to his first read. Okay? Can't do that in the NFL. And teams were adjusting. Almost every game that he was semi-good, he was good in the first half, not good in the second half. The exception against the Commanders when he didn't even play in the first half, and then they came in the second half and was outstanding. They just threw him to the wolves and he went. So if you could find that Spencer Rattler, maybe he could be a serviceable quarterback. We'll see. But I just think the Saints that are in a position, especially with the new coach coming in, I don't see there's any way getting around that he's going to be using Derek Carr to get started. Let's see. Who Dat Daddy says, we don't have a horse in the Super Bowl race, but it would be nice to have a fresh Super Bowl winning coach come in. Well, that would be Nick Sirianni. Oh, you mean Kellen Moore coming in and lead the Saints to the Super Bowl? No, I think you got to mean Nick Sirianni. He's the only fresh coach that can come in. Again, Zach's about a couple minutes away from coming in. We're going to talk about that. Can the Eagles beat the Chiefs? That's going to be a big part of it. What will that mean if they don't beat the Chiefs? Are Eagles fans going to blame Kellen Moore because he was too distracted? It's all a part too. Zach, you want to come on in? Brian says, as Zach Ewing walks in here, Brian Cabot says play Rattler if they want a top 4 pick. No doubt about it. Welcome in, Zach, and you had your own show a little while ago. You've been running around trying to get things ready for the special section. And
I don't want to talk about it.
Another debacle.
I don't want to talk about it.
You didn't think today was going to be easy, did you?
Nothing about this week was ever going to be easy, but it could at least be fun and difficult, right? Yeah. But we'll have some fun.
All right, maybe we'll have some fun with some of my commenters as well. All right, let's talk a little bit. First off, we kind of touched on I don't know how much you heard of us talking about the Saints, and I mean, it's logical. Someone put that Schefter pretty much said in Pat McAfee's show that it's going to be more, barring some strange, crazy change of heart or whatever, which I don't think any of us thinks happened. I think
it would be on Kellen Moore's side, not the Saints side of it. Yeah,
right. And so, that being said, going into this coming season, what do you feel about Kellen Moore? I know he's young. I mean, anyone that's younger than anyone sitting at this table, I mean it's really young to be a coach, but also kind of exciting too, because I think someone that young brings fresh and maybe invigorates this team a little bit.
Yeah, it's the unknown, right? Like we don't. Maybe Kellen Moore is the next Sean McVay. Maybe he's the next. Oh, I don't know. Offensive version of Bill Belichick, who was a successful coordinator for a long time, and then moves into a head coaching role seamlessly. But he could also be something of a disaster, right? Like you look at the last Eagles offensive coordinator who took a job in Shane Steichen. I don't think he's been a disaster in Indianapolis, but he also hasn't, blown anyone's hair back, right? Like it's been okay. They could have made the playoffs the first year without, with Joe Flacco starting at quarterback, which would have been an accomplishment. They took a step backward this year.
Well, I mean, that was their mistake, though, in my opinion. I mean, for thinking that Anthony Richardson was worth a number 4 overall.
Yeah, that's fair. But what I'm trying to say is Kellen Moore, chances are given the situation, I mean, I think you have to bet against him being successful here, but he is young. He does bring fresh ideas. He does have the possibility and the intrigue and the mystery of, again, maybe he's the next great thing in coaching. Maybe he's the next Sean Payton.
Yeah.
We just don't know.
Zach Ewing here on the Dattitude podcast this Monday afternoon, live from Radio Row, presented to you by Evangeline Securities. Excited to be here. By the way, A-Town, I see your comment asking a question about the Pels. You know what? I'll get to it, but it's going to be a minute. So give us a couple minutes and we'll get to that. I want to keep on talking about that.
The Pels still playing? They're still playing basketball?
Officially, they're still playing, but it depends on what do you mean by playing. I think it's the problem. Look, this team, the Saints team, we talked about it before, and I'm oddly playing the role of the positive guy, and I'm not keeping things positive because I'm trying to be adversarial and trying to pick the other side. And I really think that this team, if they can get another defensive lineman to come in and start right away, another offensive lineman like they got with Fuaga and come in and start right away, a couple other pieces, maybe a wide receiver in the third or fourth round that come in and play to complement Olave, assuming he's coming back, and Shaheed. I just don't think that this team, and I know it's a lot of ifs. I mean, we're going if. I just don't think this team is that far. They're far away from being where we are. We're not going to be sitting on Radio Row next year,
right,
doing the Saints. But I don't think they're that far away from being competitive enough to get into the NFC South race.
What would it take for the Saints to get to the Super Bowl next year? Like a meteorite to hit 28 other NFL cities or something?
I will say this. I already bet $7 on it because it was plus 12,500 or whatever.
So what you're saying is if the Saints make it to the Super Bowl, you've paid for your own trip there.
Yeah, I mean, look.
Oh no, they have to win it.
They'd have to win.
They have to win it.
So I just did it I would never forgive myself for $7. I'd rather waste $7 than if by some chance the Saints took the league by storm.
You could have just bought me Starbucks, man.
I mean, I could still buy you Starbucks.
I think as far as what this coaching search says about the Saints, does it mean that nobody wants the job and that everything is on fire and that nothing will ever be good again? No, it doesn't mean that. But does it mean that the Saints are just sitting back and all of this is going exactly according to plan? It doesn't mean that either. There's definitely been, I think, more resistance to this job than Mickey Loomis thought there was going to be. I mean, we asked him in his postseason press conference, which is, going on a month ago now, a good 3-4 weeks ago. I think it's like 4 weeks from Wednesday. What do you have to do to sell this job? And his answer was, I don't have to do anything. It's one of 32 jobs. It sells itself, blah, 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 blah. I think they found out. And again, we talked on our show this morning about optics versus reality. The optics are not good. The reality may not completely match the optics, but you don't see a bunch of smoke in the forest and there's no fire at all. It may not be as bad as you thought, but there's something wrong with this situation that coaching candidates have looked at and said, it's not for me. I don't know if that's the case with all of the coaching candidates who dropped out. It's probably not, but I think it is the case with some of them.
Well, here's my Derry Downer part of it. I will let the negativity come in at least for a minute. I think the problem was the ego inside of Saints Drive is about as big as Radio Row. I just think they probably went in this thing saying, if we want Aaron Glenn, we're going to get Aaron Glenn. I really think they believe that. And shouldn't have been thrown a loop when he picked the Jets, but were. So I think that's one of the problems. And then when they had to switch gears, like we talked about this morning, I think they were kind of like, okay, here's what we're willing to offer you, Mike McCarthy. Meanwhile, we're going to talk to Kellen Moore. And so I think that's part of the problem. And that now they're like, okay, well, McCarthy's out, so we're stuck. We better get Kellen Moore. And they're just probably not ready to be in that position.
Yeah, I mean, we started this process saying, okay, the Saints' top 3 choices are probably something like Aaron Glenn, Joe Brady, and I don't know if we ever said Ben Johnson or not because he wasn't really realistic. But, we said, okay, is it Aaron Glenn or Joe Brady? Then Mike McCarthy became available. Then it was Glenn, Brady, or McCarthy. Then Glenn stopped out and said, okay, now it's McCarthy or Brady. Then it turned out it wasn't going to be Brady. And all of a sudden, Kellen Moore's name pops out of, I mean, it didn't pop out of nowhere. I mean, they did request to speak with him that very first week.
Yeah.
But he was definitely on the back burner, at least in terms of public perception. I mean, it's going to be hard for the Saints to spin this. If it is Kellen Moore, it's going to be hard for them to spin this as this was our first choice all along, and this is who we wanted.
Is it going to be hard for them to spin it, or is it going to be hard for them to get people to believe? Because they're going to spin it of Kellen Moore's the guy we always want.
Both, right? I mean, they can try to say that.
There's no way they're not going to say that.
Yeah, they can try to say that, but I just don't know who's going to buy it. I'm not going to buy it. Like, does that mean he's going to be a bad coach? No, it does. We don't know. But he was not. I don't think anybody thinks he was their first choice.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. There was a question from before that kind of leads me in. And my friend Chris here says, doesn't Carr's contract make it so that he's guaranteed to be on the roster in 2026 if he's on the team after June 1? He could be a post-June 1 cut, and I believe they would save like 30
of the 51 million, yeah.
But realistically, you're still eating. You'd have to keep him through June, which would really be crappy to him. And then secondly, you don't really have a quarterback. So, I mean, I think the only way that happens is if they were to draft a Jackson Dart. And then even if they did that, I still think that Derek Carr would probably start this year and they would just eat it.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard you say this before, that the Saints cap situation doesn't look too bad after this year if you can get through this year.
Yeah. That's why you don't.
Okay, but the problem with that is the reason they keep having to kick the can is you have to get under the cap for this year first, and there's still tens of millions of dollars over the cap. So can you do that without restructuring Derek Carr's contract again? Because you can. I think it's feasibly possible, but it might mean no free agents. It might mean restructuring Eric McCoy's contract, Alvin Kamara's contract again, Chris Olave. I mean,
not Chris Olave, but
you're going to have to, if you don't restructure Carr, you're going to have to restructure some other contracts that maybe you didn't want to. Like, there is no one-year fix. You can't just say, oh, it gets better in 2026, because you have to kick the can down the road a little bit just to get under the number for 25.
Yeah, Jim Derry here with Zach Ewing, Dattitude podcast presented by Evangeline Securities here on Radio Row, where we'll be all week. The Saints Insiders podcast will be 9 to 12 or not thereabouts. It'll start at 9 a.m. each day the rest of the week. Dattitude will start at 1 tomorrow and Wednesday. We'll see about Thursday. Friday, I'll probably be back at my home studio. We'll see how that goes. Look, I just don't think – I hear what you're saying, but I just don't think you're going to mess with the quarterback. I think you just got to eat it at quarterback.
And that has to do with the post-June 1 conversation also. You have to be able to get there. You have to be under the cap, I believe, when the league year starts, if not right when it starts, within like a week or something in March. And so you have to find a way to get under the cap without touching Carr's contract. Then you can save $30 million against the cap post-June 1. But I think what the commenter might have been saying is if you do that, you're helping next year's cap. You're not helping this year. You can't help this year's cap by waiting to June 1st to cut Derek Carr, because you got to be under already.
I mean, I never thought I would say it like this, because it's going to sound like I'm being asking for tanking, which is the last thing that I'm doing. I just think you just do whatever you got to do, except for Carr. You do whatever you got to do with whatever else to get under the cap, and not push anything forward. You just I mean, I know you can't fully do it without restructuring at least a couple contracts, but you got to do what you got to do. If it means cutting people or however you got to make it work. I'm no cap expert. I know Jeff Duncan knows more about the cap than I do, and we'll try to have a cap expert on in the offseason. But I just think you can't kick cans down the road anymore and set a new coach up to be successful.
No, and we've been saying that, and maybe on Airline Drive they're finally starting to figure that out. I don't know. I mean,
they really thought. I mean, again, we talked about their ego. It was the same with the coaches, what they thought with their team. I think that they really thought that they were going to be not only competitive, but like top 6 to 8 team. We talked about football purgatory on the show with Mike Detillier, who's going to be sitting right over there in a few minutes. But I just think that you can't be that arrogant and realize at some point you got to wake up and you say, it just ain't working. We got to do this.
Yeah, and it made a certain amount of sense in Drew Brees' final years, and even the year or two after, when you thought, okay, we've still got a competitive roster, mostly in its prime from that great 2017 draft class, to say, let's kick this down one more year and see if we can make a run at it. But at some point in the last 3 years, it has to have dawned on everyone out there, I would hope. And yes, I do think ego is part of it, but it has to have dawned on them to that time is over. Now you've got to do it.
I'm with you for sure. Look, what do you know? I mean, is this something that we need to look up and talk about tomorrow? But do you know, like, what contracts are going to be the easiest ones to, like, what's Cam Jordan if they cut him?
Yeah, I don't. This is something Luke Johnson is really good at keeping track of. So Luke was not around today. He may be around tomorrow. We may be able to talk to him about some of that. But that's the next conversation here is, like, if it's not Carr. And by the way, all of this, including and especially the quarterback, the new coach is going to have a say. Kellen Moore may come in and say, I really like what I see from Derek Carr on film. Go ahead and restructure his contract. I want him for 2 more. Or he may say, I'm done, don't want to coach him at all. We don't know that. So he's going to have a big say in this.
He will, but I don't think he would be interested if he were, I want nothing to do with Derek Carr. I mean, I don't think he would be putting himself in this position because...
You wouldn't think so.
I mean, again, that means you're going to have to let Derek Carr stew until June 1. And that's just... I mean, I know all's fair in love and war, but I have a hard time believing that you're going to...
Yeah. Well, and Kellen Moore's a reasonable, smart person. I mean, he's going to see... even if I don't want Derek Carr long-term, things are just going to be easier for the organization's future and therefore my future if we go ahead and ride with him for 1 more year. And by the way, if you're a new coach, if you're Kellen Moore, you'd rather go 7-10 with Derek Carr than 4-13 with Spencer Rattler or some rookie or something. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to start your head coaching career like that.
Right, and look, I'll say the same thing I said before, even though I don't think Spencer Rattler is ever going to be an NFL quarterback. By no means do I blame 5-12 on Spencer Rattler, even though he went 0-6. He went 0-6 with a lot of, let's just face it, non-NFL starters playing with him.
Including himself?
Including himself.
He was never meant to start this year.
Correct.
Okay, I'm not saying he can never be a starter. It wasn't part of the... We talked about it in the preseason.
I'm saying that, but I'm not blaming 5-12.
We said in July and August, like, boy, this team's going to be in trouble if Derek Carr gets hurt because you're counting on Spencer Rattler or Jake Haener to be able to go in and play, and it just was never realistic.
Sean says Cam Jordan would save $11 million. I mean, that's a lot. If that's true, I mean, I love Cam Jordan, and I've been saying, look,
But again, I think that's a June 1 cut, which means it saves money for next year. You have to be under the cap.
Correct.
Before June 1st, and so those post-June 1st cuts don't help you do that. So somebody's contract has to be restructured, and the Saints are good at doing it. Kai Harley is really good at figuring that out. The point is you have to do it with guys. The guys you're doing it with in the past few years have helped you win. Are you still going to be able to do it with guys who can help you win in 2025? I think that's a fair question.
I just hope and look, you say 7-10. I actually think they can be. I mean, you look at what Carr has done, and again, this isn't something you strive for. It's not Carr is the bridge. Carr is the bridge to whoever the next quarterback is. I'm not sitting here saying Derek Carr is going to be the quarterback of the New Orleans Saints for the next 6 years because I don't believe that, nor do I think it's a good idea because, like Zach said, like I've said, like we've all said, Kellen Moore at some point in the near future is going to bring in his own quarterback, whether it's someone the Saints draft this year or if things are better after this year and they can go spend money and they can get rid of Carr and they can go a different way, then maybe they go that way. But look, I'm going to say this. I can't believe I'm saying this, and I don't know if it's because it would ensure that Spencer Rattler is not here anymore, but I'm actually opening up a little bit to the thought potentially of if Jackson Dart's available at 9, potentially. I'm not saying I'm for it, but I'm opening up to the thought of it.
They would have to really be blown away by him, I think. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm a film expert and that I can, you need to get Devin Jackson to tell you about that. But like, I think Jackson Dart could be a good NFL player. I know that a lot of people are falling in love with him right now. I am of the opinion, And again, I'm not a huge film guy, but I am a pretty big analytics guy, even when it comes down to looking at college QBs and what projects into future success. Okay. I think next year's draft class has 5 quarterbacks better than Jackson Dart, or really any. Now you could say Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. The ceiling is there, and so maybe you draft those guys on ceiling.
Cam Ward can be an NFL quarterback. I don't know about Shedeur.
I also don't know that they're going to be. It might be a couple of years, especially if you're on a team that has a makeshift roster like the Saints. So if it's me, that's just another reason to ride it out with Carr. Or if you want to get rid of Carr to save a little bit of money, then with Rattler or Haener or whoever, and take your lumps in year one and get one of those quarterbacks. You have Arch Manning, you have Drew Aller, you have Garrett Nussmeier coming out next year. There's a couple of others. Like,
I mean, right now Garrett Nussmeier is the leading Heisman candidate.
I saw him second behind Arch, but I mean they're both right up there, and those are guys. You know, with Louisiana ties, which I guess is a bonus. And not that you're going to draft based on that, but there's a bonus there. Doug Nussmeier may be on Kellen Moore's staff. You know, so maybe you wait, try to get like that. That's the obvious plan to me. The default plan is get through 2025 with Derek Carr. If you win 7-8 games, great. You know, maybe you get lucky with injuries and turnovers or something, and 7 or 8 wins becomes 9 or 10 wins, and you can even get a bonus playoff appearance. But if not for that, then you take your lumps and you draft your quarterback in 2026.
John Carter says hello. John Wolowski, is Mac Jones at Radio Row? Do you want to get Mac Jones as the next quarterback of the New Orleans Saints? I don't think so. UBN wants to know if we've talked analytics yet. We did that this morning.
We did a little bit. Well, Brandon Staley, you need to get Brandon Staley on the Dattitude podcast. If he's the new defensive coordinator of the Saints, you got to go all out on that one.
But see, then I'd have to be nice. I mean, I wouldn't want to torch him to his face. And if he ever goes, not that he'd be able to find it, it'd be hard for him.
You tell it like it is, or at least what you think it is. That can't change when Brandon Staley's in this chair.
And Apathy says if Moore brings Brandon Staley as his DC, I think a switch to a 3-4 base is coming. And we'll find the nose tackle in the draft. Turn Brissett into a pass rushing end. Finish the building. Finish 3-4. Finish building the 3-4 in 2026.
Norm's shaking his head, man. Look, in order to do that, you have to turn over the entire roster, which they may have to do anyway, okay? But there are some guys out there, Brzee being one of them, you want to keep. Like Brian Brzee is a promising player. He's probably a guy who's going to get his 5th-year option picked up and get that extension. Like, he's a guy you want to keep around. You don't want to be moving him around and making him do different stuff. You need to build around those guys.
You definitely do. And look, you can't come in, and when you don't have the flexibility that the Saints don't have, you just can't completely you got to be careful, I guess, because with all the different things, and I saw one here earlier, and I think Chris is right for the most part from what he understands. Kamara and Taysom, the only other two that saved nothing by cutting. I mean, Taysom, we don't even know what his status is going to be. I mean, his injury is the kind of he basically ripped up everything. His injury could linger into next year.
Yeah.
I mean, so
no doubt about it.
Taysom Hill?
I mean, don't even know the answer to that. I think you do if he wants to. Like, we talked immediately after the injury. Like, Taysom Hill's 34 years old. He's made his money. He's got a big family. Does Taysom Hill want to keep playing after an injury like that? I think the answer is yes, but the Saints need to get that answer from him before they make any plans. But yeah, I think if Taysom Hill wants to come back, that guy he's one of one, man. You keep that guy around because
definitely one of one.
We've seen this Saints offense this year with him versus without him. Those are some pretty dramatic splits.
Just FYI, heads up to everyone out there. Tomorrow on the show, we don't know guests it's not like they're just walking around. I don't think either one of us were quite sure what to expect when we came out here. There are some people walking around, but for the most part, the people are a lot of them doing shows. Like, I saw Ross Tucker over there. He was doing a show, and I imagine he's going to disappear as soon as the show's over. But it's not like there's a pool you just grab.
No, I think there's going to be more people walking by later in the week.
Yeah.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I know on Saints Insider we've got Josh Jacobs on Thursday, Deuce McAllister Thursday. Trying to think. We're trying to get Sean Payton Wednesday. That one's iffy. Can't promise that one. Couple of other guests we've got coming in. Michael Brockers, former LSU linebacker, will be here Friday. So we've got some guests coming in, but for the most part, the walkthroughs are going to be. I don't know what to expect on that. I don't know how willing they'll be to stop by.
And we're doing some of our things virtual here. I know tomorrow we have Adam Chernoff here, who's really legitimately maybe my favorite guest. I mean, and if you don't remember Adam, we had him on in the off season. There is no better guy to talk about the sports betting angle. And, you know, we used to have him on Bayou Bets every now and then, and he came on my shows when we were doing predictions before last year. Not this past season, but the 23 season. But he's going to come on the show. We're going to talk about the betting angle. The numbers haven't changed all that much since we were talking last week. Larry Holder's going to come on the show at some point. One of the vice presidents of Caesars is going to come on the show on Wednesday afternoon as well. And I'm working on a few other people. So we'll see who we get as we go along. And I think it's just kind of, that's where we are.
Yeah, you got to play it by ear here is what we're finding out. And you mentioned we're going to be 9 to 12. That's approximate. Might be more like 9:30 to 11:30 on some days. We might even go a little past 12 some days. It just kind of depends on how things are going and who's hanging out. And around.
Yeah, and I like to do it from the local end as well. So if I see some local people that I want to get on the show, I'm gonna try to get them as much as I'm gonna try to get someone else from outside. So that's how we're working here on the Dattitude podcast this morning. Okay, I keep saying this morning. It feels like morning. It was a pain in the keister to get here, but it was a lot easier than I thought it would be to park. And then just walking here, and you and I talked about an insider this morning. I've never seen any. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been to a lot of different events. I've never seen anything like what's in here this afternoon.
Yeah, just from talking to people who have covered past Super Bowls, Rod said he was at the 2019 Super Bowl in Atlanta, the one the Saints should have been in. Okay, after the no call, Patriots-Rams. And he said it was pretty similar to this. In fact, it might have even been bigger than this. But I was talking to some Eagles reporters this morning who said that even 2 years ago in Phoenix, when the Eagles played the Chiefs the first time, it was not this big. So I think it fluctuates a little bit. But yeah, some of the sets are impressive. Some of the, it's overwhelming is the right word for it.
And we're looking at where we're situated. We're kind of like on one end of the convention center. And where we're situated, we're looking at the end that's less populated, but we're looking at Sirius XM setup, and we were joking this morning that Sirius XM setup is probably similar to what the entire Radio Row was like maybe 30 years ago or so.
They have there's 3 or 4 person desks. They got 4 different sets with desks, so they could have 4 shows going on simultaneously here on Radio Row. Pretty crazy. They got the fantasy sports, they got their NFL radio, they got Mad Dog, and I can't see what the 4th one is, but they could have all 4 of those shows going on at the same time.
Yeah, it's just, and then Bleacher Report is also right in front of us, and you know, if it's happening, it's happening here. We'll have. I'll try to get some video tonight from Media Night. We'll all be there, and again, Roger Goodell talking at 3:00. We'll see what he has to say. We know how much y'all love Roger Goodell. All right, Charles Mangus, welcome. I know it is weird that I'm on in the afternoon. I was here at my regular time slot, but I was just talking to Zach. Was sitting in my seat, and I was sitting where he was this morning. Dylan says 4th place schedule will help. We talked about that, and the fact that the schedule. I mean, it hasn't helped the Saints that much the last 2 years, because 2 years ago we were talking about it was a historically easy schedule, and then this past year it was 28th and 29th, and we kind of expect there was a big difference actually between 4th and 3rd. That last day of the season with Carolina beating Atlanta and the Saints losing to Tampa helped them and changed it. Instead of being 22nd, 23rd, they're like 28.
I would just word of caution: things change quickly in the NFL.
Right, that's true.
But on paper, you'd much rather play Chicago and the Giants than you would Green Bay and the Cowboys. Right.
That's right. That's who Carolina gets.
As of today, February the 3rd, you would rather have that schedule. Whether that's still going to be the case on October the 3rd after we've seen these teams play for a month, I don't know. I mean, what if Ben Johnson really unlocks something in Caleb Williams? Dennis Allen's the defensive coordinator. They're like, the Bears could end up being pretty good.
Is that New Orleans?
No, it's in Chicago.
It's in Chicago.
Yeah, it's in Chicago. that's like that game may not end up being easy, although at Green Bay was never going to be easy either. Like, I don't know. I mean, things change fast in the NFL, so it's hard to sit here and say. But yes, as of right now, on paper, they have the schedule to where if you bring back Derek Carr and he continues to play at the level he did when healthy this year, and you can just kind of stay healthier everywhere else.
That people just can't. We're going to get into it in a minute. Okay, that's the next thing I want to talk about. But here's a comment.
But to finish my thought, you could end up being pretty good if that happens.
No, I agree.
Against this schedule, could you win 9-10 games? Yeah, I'd say that's the ceiling, but it is possible.
I definitely think that it's a possibility. Sean says, sign Justin Fields to a 1-year deal and draft Genty, cut Carr. But your problem is you can't sign anybody. I mean, this team can't sign anybody, which is the problem. I mean, yeah, you can make certain things work. If you want to kick cans again, they can't afford to kick cans down the road anymore. This team, the cans, it's not even dented. It's like kicked in. It's rusty. It's opened up. Stop kicking.
What did Baker Mayfield get from the Bucs last year? 1 year's like
8.
Was it 8? I mean, Fields is getting at least that. You think he's in a similar situation where he's kind of been a failed starter, but maybe there's still some upside there.
Of eating $21 million, which is the bare minimum you're going to eat.
Right. And that's the problem is, can you fit in an $8 to $10 million deal for Justin Fields and still get under the cap? Again, you can't. Derek Carr is going to cost you $51 million against the cap, no matter what you do until June 1, and that only really helps you for next year because you're not signing free agents after, at least not major free agents after June 1. You know, at that point, the hay's in the barn for the 2025 roster, except for some veteran minimum contracts here and there.
Katie Brown isn't happy that, I guess give Sean a rest, he says. If you listen to the podcast after the fact, Katie Brown says, give Sean a rest. I'd understand interviewing him if he wasn't an active coach, but we have to move on. Doesn't mean we don't still want to talk to Sean Payton here in New Orleans. I think that a lot of people are still going to want to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if he's going to show up or not, but I think would have some interesting opinions on how things ended here with Dennis Allen, who was his top lieutenant for years. And also, I mean, look, just how he's built things in Denver.
Yeah.
Like that's a pertinent question to the NFL at large. So
Gabe has a point that I didn't really think about it, but I don't think I hurt your feelings when I was talking about Adam Chernoff being my favorite guest, and I have a guest.
And I'm sitting right. Oh man, yeah. No, Adam's great.
Gabe's stirring a pot. UBN is probably going to try to stir a pot soon. I don't know.
Adam's great, and I believe he picked an Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl before the year, I think, as did Scott Rabelais, by the way. I got to give him credit on our LSU Insider podcast. We did Super Bowl predictions back in August, and he picked Eagles-Chiefs. So.
All right, let's talk a little bit. We're definitely going to come back to Saints, everybody. So, and I know you don't want to talk a lot about Saints, but we are on Radio Road to Super Bowl, and we do want to talk about the Super Bowl. And look, just coming into this thing, and you and I were talking this morning about we're not giving away our picks yet, even though I've already turned mine in to Scott Rabelais. So my pick is kind of locked in. I guess theoretically on my show I can do whatever I want, but I know what I'm picking. I'm not going to change it, and I'm going to try not to give it away yet as well. But do you think that, I always say don't bet against God. Does Saquon Barkley change that mentality? Is he good enough to beat God? I mean, he's not playing against God because they both play offense. But is he good enough to beat God?
I got to come up with my pick because we got to put him in our special section. I haven't come up with mine yet, but I'm on the fence. I keep thinking I'm going to pick Kansas City because, again, if it's a 3-point game, 4-point game with 5 minutes left, are you really betting against Mahomes in that scenario?
No.
I don't think anybody would. Like, if he's getting the ball, he's got some amazing record of 7 out of 8 times in his playoff career he's had a chance to tie or take the lead in the last 5 minutes, and he's done it 7 of 8 times or something so crazy.
8 consecutive playoff games. I mean, do you know how hard it is to win 8 consecutive playoff games?
How hard is it to win one playoff game?
Exactly. He's done 8 in a row.
So,
I mean, Saquon Barkley didn't even know what the playoffs was until he went to the
he
Eagles.
was with the Giants a couple years ago. But
they weren't very good.
Having said that, the Eagles are a very good front-running team. They have it. They're built for it in the running game. They're built for it with their pass rush. I mean, even the Rams, when they tried to come back on him, ultimately failed because of that pass rush. And the Rams needed some breaks to stay in that game at all. Like, the Eagles could have salted that game away. Saquon just goes down instead of going on that long touchdown run, and it kind of changed the. Anyway, point is, they're a very good front-running team. If they can get out to a lead, and the Chiefs kind of play with their food sometimes and let teams stay around and get out to leads and then come back, this is not a team you want to be down 10 points against at halftime. The Eagles can just squeeze the life out of a game.
Well, why you would want to pick the Chiefs is easy. You'd pick Chiefs because no matter what needs to happen, Patrick Mahomes is going to find a way, because he always does find a way. The reason why you would, to me, the number one reason why if you were going to pick the Eagles to win, it's not just Saquon, but it's the fact that, and we talked about this morning, the fact that I think Steve Spagnuolo was happy that he got the Bills over the Ravens, because at least with the Bills, you stop Josh Allen, you're probably going to be good. I mean, you can't completely stop Josh Allen, but you can focus on Josh Allen.
Yeah.
With the Ravens and both with the Eagles as well, when you can't just focus on Lamar Jackson. The Bills did it, and they found a way, and they did a great job of it. But the Ravens, obviously with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, and now the Eagles with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, it is really tough to be able to focus on one or the other, because I really think Jalen Hurts, and I'm going to tell you, this is probably going to be one of our bets later in the week, a prop bet Jalen Hurts over rushing yards. I don't know exactly what it is, but they tried to, sell everybody on Jalen was hurt going into the NFC Championship game, and then, he didn't look so hurt. And I think there's going to be so much focus on Saquon Barkley that I think you could easily see Hurts running for 50 or 60 yards in this game.
Yeah, and by the way, he had 70 yards and 3 touchdowns rushing in Super Bowl 57 a couple years ago. Eagles leading rusher by far. So.
And that was when you knew he was going to be the
now, rusher. I will say this. The flip side of what I said is true. The Eagles are great front runners. They're not a great chase team. Okay, so if we're talking betting, a couple bets that I kind of like are you can bet halftime, full-time bets. You bet Chiefs and Eagles, and you're going to get plus money on both of those. You guarantee yourself a profit, assuming the team that's ahead at halftime. Now, it's tied at halftime. You could end up like there are ways you lose your money here, right? But I really think that if one team gets out to a lead, they have a big advantage, because the Eagles are not a great chase team. If you can make them be one-dimensional, Jalen Hurts is not going to go win games for you with his arm. At least I don't think so. Not against this defense, not against the blitzes that they're going to bring in these exotic ways. And that kind of takes Saquon out of the game a little bit too.
Yeah, and Gabe's got a good point. If you do like that, because if he does rush for 70 yards again and the Eagles win, then Jalen Hurts is probably going to be the MVP over Saquon Barkley. And he's saying right now you can find that bet at like plus 375 odds on the market. So, and again, if you don't know, a lot of you watching don't necessarily know what odds mean. And we're talking about odds. If you say plus 375, it means you need to bet. If you bet $100 on Jalen Hurts to win the MVP and he wins, you'd win $375, or $10 wins you $37.50. If you say minus 375, it means you would have to bet $375 to win 100. So that's what we talk about when we're talking about betting. Again, I'm not willing to give away. I just think that this is going to be. I know so many people, and I understand why, wanted to see either Buffalo or Baltimore be in the Super Bowl, and of course you wanted to see him against Washington, and you wanted to see him against Jaden Daniels. But we got the opposite of what a lot of people wanted. That being said, I just believe the two best teams in the NFL coming into the playoffs, and that includes Detroit. I think the two best teams in the league, at least at this time of year, are going to be playing each other this Sunday.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I picked Philadelphia and Buffalo a long time ago, and I was close, but I don't think you could watch that AFC Championship game last weekend and think that Kansas City was not the better team when it came down to it. Now, Detroit probably in Week 10 was the best team in the NFL. They had a lot of defensive injuries down the stretch. Jared Goff obviously struggled in that divisional round game. When you're talking about a one-game scenario, anything can happen. The Commanders should have been out against Tampa Bay, if we're being honest. They got very lucky to survive that game. So it coulda, woulda, shoulda been Tampa Bay against Detroit, and then maybe the Lions have a different fate, and then they're hosting the NFC Championship game, and we're having a different conversation. But the way it worked out, yes, I think We have two worthy teams here. Should have a great game here. The spread's 2 points. I mean, that's right where it should be. I think we're in for a good one.
Yeah, and we'll be we'll be giving our official predictions out on Wednesday. Maybe you can stop by Wednesday and give your official.
Yeah, should be able to. I got to have it done by then. So.
All right, so we'll do that. All right. Lastly, before we go, I want to there's something that we brought up, and I promised I would bring it up briefly when you came in. A touchy subject here. I think you know where I'm going with this, but the emails about the situation that the archdiocese trying to cover up the scandal, the sex scandal that they had with their priests and the Saints. Just how did we explain that this morning? Did you see
Well, okay, so first of all, there isn't any new information. I'm sure people have seen the headlines. The new thing that happened is that the emails have been released to the media. Okay, and the way that they get released to the media is because the lawyers for the victims subpoenaed them, and then they have them, and they have the option to release them to the media, which they did. Okay, but the information included in the emails is all information that was reported on 5 and 6 years ago. But now the Saints at the time kind of said, no, we didn't do any of that, and now we kind of have proof that they did. Okay, this is the smoking gun that we now have. So that's what's new. There's no new information.
What do we think this does to the Saints, or how does what's?
I mean, it's not a good look, obviously.
I mean, Lance has got a good question. Any concern that the Saints would lose Kellen Moore over this?
I would think no. Maybe if you're Kellen Moore or his agent, you have a question or two about it. But this never had anything to do with the football operations of the Saints. This was all their public relations, their communications staff aiding the archdiocese in how to respond to media inquiries and media coverage of this scandal. The Saints were not involved in the scandal. The Saints were involved in a public relations I don't want to use the word scheme because there's a negative connotation, but the public relations campaign that the archdiocese used to respond to the scandal becoming public. Okay. That is not a good look for the Saints, but again, it has nothing to do with their football operations. It has more to do with the fact that their owner, Gail Benson, is good friends with the Archbishop. She is very heavily entrenched in the archdiocese here in New Orleans. And so it almost feels like Greg Bensel and some of his top lieutenants were kind of serving her as the owner, as their boss. And she said, hey, can you help out with this? And they said, well, you're my boss. Yeah, I'll help out with it. It didn't have anything to do with the football itself. Does that make it okay?
Rocky,
and that's kind of in the eye of the beholder.
Rocky asked, does Gail lose ownership over this or have pressure to sell?
I don't think so. Because, again, this is all information that was out there 5 and 6 years ago. We're just kind of getting it's going through the news cycle again because these emails came out. Oh, it has to be intentional, right? It has to be intentional. If you're the lawyers and you want maximum impact for this story, there's 150 radio stations here all having shows all week like we are with hours of airtime to fill. And we're talking about it, right? So, yeah, I think that was intentional.
Yeah, and look,
again, it's not new information.
If you walk by a lot of these booths, because they're in New Orleans, they're talking about the Super Bowl is their number one story, but the Saints are also a secondary story because they're in New Orleans. The Saints are going to get talked a lot more this week than they would have been talked about otherwise, especially because they're the last team to hire a coach, and not only the last team to hire a coach, by far the last team. Here we are.
More than
February
a week.
The 3rd. It's not going to happen until February the 10th, most likely.
And a lot of these people don't know that this is old news.
Right.
Okay, so they're talking about it like it's brand new. So, yes, there is going to be kind of a nasty news cycle here for the Saints.
There'll be people saying, what the hell is this?
Yeah. And look, we're talking about one of the most evil, reprehensible things that could ever happen, right? Like there is no defending the actual scandal itself. But I think it's important to just throw out there, to be clear, the Saints were not part of the scandal. They are sort of aiding the Catholic Church. And, hey, the Catholic Church has to move on from the scandal, right? Like, part of that is you get rid of everyone, you renounce everything. but you still have
It's
to
not
move
something
on.
We're going to ignore here
Right.
either. Though.
From a public relations standpoint, you have to move on, and the Saints have talented public relations people. They ask for their help. That's what the story is.
Gabe Henderson passed along breaking news. I'm not sure how many people will be interested other than Gabe Henderson and his friends, but the Texans are hiring Rams tight end coach and passing game coordinator Nick Caney as their offensive coordinator. Look,
where's Bobby Slow?
I was going to say, it was just last year at this time where people were considering was Bobby Slowick a head coaching candidate.
Yeah.
And he goes from being a head coach. Goes to show, a lot of people I see on social media going back to Kellen Moore. It's funny because why would Kellen Moore want that job? Well, it just takes one bad season in Philadelphia, just like Bobby Slowick had in Houston. Well, you don't take a job if you got one that's offered. If you have a bad season next year, he'll have his pick of the litter. You don't have the pick of anything if your Eagles go 9-8 next year and you're not scoring like you were this year.
Speaking of bad seasons, I got distracted. I saw a guy in a visor walk by in a black shirt. I thought just for a second I thought it was Dennis Allen.
Oh, come on over.
Yeah, but it was not.
Come on over, DA.
Why he would come to Radio Row wearing a visor, I don't know.
I don't know. Well, maybe he just wears
But that didn't occur to my alligator brain when I.
Hakeem, welcome to the show. Always a regular here in Dattitude. We appreciate you being here. And we're here on Radio Row. Jim Derry along with Zach Ewing on this Dattitude podcast on a Monday afternoon, not a Monday morning. Monday afternoon presented by Evangeline Securities. We thank Evangeline Securities for sponsoring and being the title sponsor of the Dattitude podcast. Before you go, look, I mean, where we are with Saints, and we're gonna be talking about this. We can't get away from it. That's what people here they want to listen to, even more than the Super Bowl. We'll be talking as much about that as we will the Super Bowl. But at some point, what else can you say? Because, I mean, we're really not going to know anything. You got to think at this point, as far as like, he's not going to talk to anybody hiring who you're going to hire. He might have done that over the weekend if they had a day off or had some time himself. But it's all Super Bowl now. How many questions do we think Kellen Moore is going to get asked tonight at media night about the Saints?
I mean, what I would do if I were him, and what I think he'll do, and this is the boring way to do this, but is just shut it down from the very beginning and say, look, I can't talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it. That will all get taken care of after the Super Bowl. I'm focused on the Super Bowl.
8 more questions.
But given the nature of media day or opening night, as they call it now, you're going to have a gaggle of reporters, and honestly, some of these people aren't really reporters.
Right.
They get media passes for the week, and they're going to crowd around him, and he'll get asked that question. They'll all hear it and hear him say, I'm not talking about it. And then they'll disperse and go on to, other people, and Andy Reid and Chiefs players and Travis Kelce and other Eagles players. And then another group will come over and say, look, the crowd's not big around Kellen Moore. Let's go at. And then he'll have to say it again. And then he'll have to say it again and again and again. They're out there for an hour. It's going to, so you're going to hear that a lot from him tonight, but I think that's how he has to handle it because there are NFL rules. He can't even say that he's in an agreement with the Saints.
Correct.
And we don't know whether he for sure is or whether it's just looking that way.
Oh, I think every respected NFL media person is all but said it's going to be.
Yeah, but to be clear, they cannot, by NFL rule, they cannot be in an agreement until next week. So he can't say anything. And I doubt he will.
Yeah. And there was the debacle 2 years ago when, the Eagles defensive coordinator kind of cat got out of the bag and they allowed 38 points and lost, and Eagles fans still hate him to this day.
I will say, at that point, what you're going to see, and our reporters will do this, and I'm sure others will too, you're going to see more creative lines of questioning to Kellen Moore about hypotheticals like, well, what would you look for in a new coaching job? And,
right.
What's your opinion of Derek Carr? And,
exactly.
like they'll get some of these questions to try to get him to kind of in a roundabout way talk about what he thinks. And we'll see how adept he is at dodging those or sidestepping them or answering them without really answering them.
It's like Sean says, do I think Moore will get distracted by being in New Orleans? I mean, how can he not? How can he not be distracted? I mean, you could try to focus on this all you can try to focus on winning a Super Bowl, which you are, but at the same time, you're in New Orleans. we don't expect them to leave New Orleans after the game, one way or the other.
And by total coincidence, because the NFC team was always going to be the team that got the Saints facility,
Right.
but by total coincidence, the Eagles are using the Saints facility for practice and meetings this week. The Chiefs are using Tulane. So,
has he fit the drapes?
Yeah, he is going to be literally in the building that he'll be in charge of, assuming he takes this job.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not going to say what Gabe's talking about. He hooks up to Bobby Slowick. That's not real nice, Gabe. Calm down, man. All right. Well, we will talk to you, I'm sure, going on the rest of the week. Definitely Wednesday. I want to have you at some point come on and talk about.
Absolutely. I'm going to need some cough drops by the end of the week, but it's all good.
You ain't the only one.
Yeah.
I mean, but last thing, I will say this too. We were talking about what's different between now and the last time the Super Bowl was here, I was working in news. So I had nothing to do with Super Bowl coverage. But the time before that, which is now, if I remember correctly, 2002, because it was after September, after 9/11. So 2002, which means 23 years ago. There were all sorts of differences, but one thing was different was Media Day was on a Tuesday, and it was in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So now, like you said, they make it opening night. They make a big deal out of it. Who that daddy says, tell Mickey to stay the hell away from
him. We're gonna have plenty of time for talking about that and joking about that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this chaos of tonight and to see what it's like.
It's gonna be fun. Well, and again tomorrow, I think both on the Insider and on our show here, we will have some video, and I will get something of Kellen Moore to put on our shows for tomorrow. We'll talk again tomorrow, one way or the other, and
all right, Jim.
Have you on the show for sure Wednesday with your pick.
Good deal.
Zach Ewing here on the Dattitude podcast. We thank him for joining us. He's got a lot of stuff going on, and I was joking, but only kind of joking with that special section we got going on at the Times-Picayune. Monster, especially when changes happen last minute. You got to figure out a way to make them all fit in. All right, time to bring in Gabe. Mondays, we can't have Mondays with Gabe. Look, to let everybody know, I got an echo in my ear, so when I'm talking, I'm going to have the earphones down. When Gabe's talking, I'll put them up. So if you wonder what the hell I'm doing, that's what it is. But we can't, just because we're here on Radio Row doesn't mean we can't have Mondays with Gabe. Now that you're over your hatred for Bobby Slowick, how are you doing this afternoon?
Doing well, I think. Texans upgraded. It was a crazy weekend in sports. And we're finally at Super Bowl week. A lot of people don't realize. I'm sure you can relate to this. I'm sure Zach and all of the Saints insiders can relate to this. Super Bowl week or the Super Bowl weeks are kind of exhausting in the sense that you are writing about and talking about the same thing for 2 weeks, and you just can't wait for the game to be played.
They are. They're tough even when it's not in your city. I mean, doing Super Bowl stuff. I mean, we don't take. We're working every day when it's a Super Bowl, whether it's in our city or not. Who that daddy says, "Hey, Gabe," and Lance says, "I think he means we got an upgrade because you're here instead of and over me. An upgrade over me."
No, he's talking about Bobby Slowick.
Oh well.
Let me just say to Lance, go look at Bobby Slowick's the Texans' EPA numbers under Bobby Slowick. They ran the ball on 3rd and long situations more than any other team in the NFL this year, and it worked a fraction of the time. So just
all right, we're going to talk about a couple different things here this morning. Mm-hmm. One, I'm going to go way back. Where is it? I don't even know if he's still with us or not. There it is. A-Town asked, it's all about football this week, of course, but do I see the Pels making major moves this week before the trade deadline on Thursday? Well, there have been a lot of moves that we're going to talk about the Luka thing in a minute, but I mean, do you think the Pelicans make any moves before Thursday?
I think it depends. They've been flirting with deals for what seems like forever now. I think what they've landed on is that Zion is going to be the centerpiece of the franchise. It'll just come down to whether or not any team is interested enough to pony up and pay what they're asking for Brandon Ingram. I think Brandon Ingram could definitely help a team get over the hump. I think he could help a contending team. I don't really think he makes a difference here in New Orleans anymore. So do I think they should make moves? Yes. Do I think they will? I don't know.
I agree. I think they're going to make some move, but I think they're going to. It's going to be a small move, maybe to get them under the luxury tax. I don't think there's going to be a huge move that they're going to make that's going to change anything in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and the one difference,
there's not going to be any kind of CJ McCollum move like they did a couple years ago.
Yeah, I actually think you might see more movement with the Pelicans now with the DeJounte Murray news, the fact that he's out for the year. I mean, any hope, if there was any at all, left in the Smoothie King Center is now gone.
Yeah.
They are not doing anything this year, and I know that sounds harsh, but I think we all know it's true. So I just think it would be best for them to start planning for the future now, as opposed to be stuck with, I know Ingram's been a true professional, but you don't want a situation like a Jimmy Butler where you've kind of been telling a guy that he could potentially leave and he just never gets a chance to.
I agree wholeheartedly. All right. We got to talk about this, of course. Anthony Davis to Dallas, Luka to the Lakers. A couple of things that come to mind, and I'll get your opinion on it in just a minute. I think this is the most ridiculous trade that I've ever seen. I mean, that's how absurd. You don't trade, and look, some Mavs fans are trying to make excuses for their franchise. Well, they're gonna, they weren't gonna be able to afford him, blah, blah, whatever. He's the cornerstone of your franchise. He would be the cornerstone of anyone's franchise. And so to trade him is completely absurd. But even beyond that, let's say, okay, we're not going to be able to pay him. We need to trade Luka. First of all, you need to have an internal discussion, which it doesn't sound like the Mavericks had an internal discussion. And secondly, and maybe more importantly, if you don't want it to look fishy, you need to, at the bare minimum, shop Luka around, because you probably could have got better than what you got, in my opinion. And I just think it's absurd to just automatically trade it in the Lakers. It's almost as if, whether this happened or whether it didn't happen, it probably didn't. But it almost looks as if the NBA says, let's find some big splash. Hey, Dallas, what do you think about sending Luka to the Lakers? I mean, that's what it kind of looks like. If you don't shop around, arguably one of the top 3 or 4 players in the NBA, and you just make a move like that, it looks fishy.
I see what you're getting at. I mean, David Stern is rolling over in his grave. He would never
there's
let
no
something
doubt
like this happen. I don't think it's fishy. The one thing that the Mavericks said throughout, they were going for secrecy here, because the second that you let the world know, because here's the thing, the more people, the more teams you involve, the greater risk you take with it getting out. And the Mavericks GM went as far to yesterday as to credit Rob Pelinka, the GM of the Lakers, because they've been talking about this for weeks and not a single soul knew. So I would say, I mean, they kind of knew what they wanted. That's the biggest problem. Not a single soul knew. That kind of what bothers me most. It's a huge issue, because, I mean, I don't know if you saw any clips of the press conference. Did you see Jason Kidd yesterday at that press conference?
No, I saw a picture of it. I didn't see the actual clip.
Lifeless. I mean, he's sitting there. I'm sure he wanted to just grab a pillow from somewhere in the facility and scream into it, because it's absurd. I don't understand how. I mean, moving on from the whole fishy aspect, which I understand. I just don't know how this makes any sense. I get it. Anthony Davis is still a very good player. That's the one thing that's getting lost in all of this, is Anthony Davis is still really good. He's injury prone. He's 31, almost 32 years old. But at the same time,
he'll be 32 on March 11th.
At the same time, I don't. He gives you better defense than Luka if you want to be a defensive team, which I think is all just crap anyway. I think they're
Well, I'm with
using
who
every
that
excuse
daddy.
under the sun.
I'm with who that
to
daddy.
justify.
Apathy says it as well. The NBA is really starting to become unwatchable. And then look, it already kind of was for me. And when you make deals like this, I mean, I was at least watching in the playoffs. The Pels stinks on. Haven't been watching them. I mean, I've been busy enough with what we're doing here in Dattitude, talking mostly Saints. And, you know, I've apologized multiple times that we haven't gotten into the Pels yet, but I just can't. And my heart's not in it. And when I see things like this, and you see Luka Doncic being traded to the Lakers for Anthony Davis, I mean, it kind of ruins it even more.
Yeah, it's interesting because I believe it was Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo on their podcast talked about the fact that Dalton Connect, who's a promising rookie for the Lakers, and multiple first-round picks were involved in this deal until the latter days. And here's the really interesting thing is, and let me just tip my cap to Rob Pelinka for this, because I mean he was given a gift. If someone calls you up and says, "Hey, you want Luka?" You didn't orchestrate a masterclass. But the one thing that he did is he used the Mavericks' excuses against them. You know, the Mavericks have said, well, we don't want to pay him $345 million when his conditioning isn't great. I mean, there's that crazy clip where they took the beer out of his hand after clinching a spot in the finals.
Yeah,
and
what was that?
So what Rob Pelinka did is he said, hey, I mean, you have conditioning concerns, you have drinking concerns. Those concerns are valid for us as well. So why don't you lower your asking price? And he got that. I mean, at the end of the day, what this seems like is, you know how anytime you're in a fantasy league, a new person joins and you kind of just bully them early on. You send them these terrible trades and just see if they accept. That's what this
Every
seems
now
like.
and then someone accepts it.
Exactly, and that's what this seems like. But for the Lakers, we've talked about this from a Mavericks perspective. From a Lakers perspective, it's a masterstroke. I mean, they are sitting here. They're not contending. LeBron is not getting any younger. Anthony Davis isn't getting any younger. And they're a directionless franchise. But now, all you have to do is fork over some money, which the Lakers don't mind doing, and you've got your superstar until he retires.
I didn't know that.
Luka is.
He just bought a $15 million house in Dallas last week. Yikes.
Yeah. I mean, the crazy part of it is Luka wasn't asking it.
Yeah.
Which is just insane. And this would never happen under Mark Cuban. A lot of people forget that Mark Cuban isn't the one calling the shots anymore. He sold a majority stake in that team.
He's just courtside.
Yeah, he is. And I'm sure he was just as pissed as anyone. But yeah, from the Lakers' perspective, it's a masterstroke.
Yeah. Final thoughts here before we move on, because I'm going to actually wrap up the show. We're gonna finish the show in an hour and a half today. Might be a recent record.
It might be a record recently. Final thoughts. I guess I don't really have any. If we're going to come on and make Super Bowl picks throughout the week.
Yep. So. Wednesday, we're going to make picks for sure.
There you go.
We'll figure out how to do it. All right. Well, I got a couple things to talk about, but who knows? Maybe we'll say hello tomorrow.
Oh, you know what? I do. Lance just reminded me. So thank you, Lance, of this. He said Myles Garrett. Yeah, Myles Garrett. I think what ends up, this is just my early prediction. Mark this down, the 118.01 mark of Dattitude on Monday, February 3rd. I believe what happens, Myles Garrett gets traded for a big haul. Cleveland takes Abdul Carter at 2. If the Titans are dumb enough to take a quarterback at 1 and pass on a generational talent, I believe in Abdul Carter.
Or take Travis Hunter.
Don't take Travis Hunter.
If
Abdul Carter is there, no matter what, wherever X team picks, if Abdul Carter is there, you take him. He's the best player in this draft, and I wholeheartedly believe that.
Well, we'll be talking more about draft when we're done with Super Bowl, because we're going to go basically straight into draft. I mean, frankly, we'll talk a little Pelicans. Of course, we're going to talk LSU women's basketball, probably more than we'll talk Pelicans. We'll talk about March Madness, but we are going to pretty much get into the draft right when the Super Bowl is over. I got a vacation coming up, but other than that, it'll be. But we will see you either tomorrow or Wednesday when we do picks. See you, Gabe. All right, back here on Radio Row. I can lose these. Last 10 minutes of the show or so, it's going to be pretty much all Saints, unless you got another question out there. And there is one more thing that I want to talk about as well. Real quick, Chad Gage says, crazy question. Maybe I don't want to address what ifs. would the Saints have been better off under Rita? Yeah, Tom's daughter, obviously. I mean, that's not just a what if. That's like that wasn't possible. I mean, that was the family riff. And I actually got to know Rita a little bit there when I was covering the Voodoo. Got invited to some things, and I had talked to her multiple times and got to know quite a few inside the Saints organization. When I was covering the Arena Football League, was actually a president of the Arena Football League Writers Association. Yes, there was such a thing. Went to 5 straight Arena Bowls or 6 straight. I can't remember. 5 straight, I think. But to answer your question, I don't know if things would be better. I don't think so. I mean, I guess in the grand scheme of things, Rita would maybe be less loyal to Mickey, if you want to say. If that might be the only thing, though. So would that change where the Saints are right now? I mean, I can't say. I can't say whether it would change anything. Maybe it would have changed it for the worse. Who knows? Maybe Rita would have wanted to be more involved, because I think that's a possibility. I mean, one thing you can say about Miscale is she's pretty much hands off. She lets these people do their thing. I mean, rightly or wrongly, she puts her trust in Dennis Lauscha and Mickey Loomis and, a lot of, 4 or 5 other people. And those are the people she trusts, and those are the people who make the decisions. And who that daddy, and less loyal to New Orleans, I don't necessarily agree. Again, I'm going to say something that I said on the Insiders this morning that I think that needs to be repeated here. I'm not taking up for Mickey Loomis, okay? But I think that there's so much of and this is a good thing, by the way, that you're so spoiled by winning, okay? Saints fans have been so spoiled with winning. Again, that's a good thing. Not saying it's a bad thing in any way. But when you look, it's not Chicken Little, the sky is falling, okay? I mean, I don't know how many times I say this. You look at the last 4 years. Have they been good? No. But have they been a complete disaster except for this past year? No, they have not been a complete disaster. I mean, two of the last 4 seasons were winning seasons. I mean, I'm not suggesting by any means that you should be happy as a fan with just having a winning season. I will never say that. But at the same time, it doesn't mean the sky is falling and it's the end of the line for this franchise. I mean, I think the problem is that a lot of people went into the season expecting, as they do a lot of other seasons, expecting more than they got, especially last year, especially in 2023. I think fans, and look, I got caught into the trap as well right before the season started, because I kept saying 8-9-ish, 9-8, somewhere around there, and I got caught in the trap by my other friends in the media, and I started buying into the stuff. And I think whatever Rod Walker was selling me, and maybe Larry Holder sprinkled me with pixie dust, I don't know. Whatever it was, I started buying it and believing that they would be better. But it's not that bad. I mean, just think about if you're a Bears fan. When's the last time the Bears have had anything to really cheer about? I mean, 1985? I mean, think about it. I mean, you can pick a lot of other teams. When's the last time the Raiders were really, really good? I mean, when John Gruden, I guess really before John Gruden was there, I guess, but they went to the Super Bowl. How long ago was that? 20 years ago? Lance, thank you. I mean, I'm just trying to be realistic. I mean, UBN says, would I ever imagine I'd be saying Saints fan to spoil with the winning in the 90s? No. And I mean, I think that's part of it for me because I'm older and I've been around. And look, I get people under the age of 45 don't remember. You probably don't even remember that much about the Ditka days. If you're under 40, you definitely don't. So you don't. I mean, think about it. My son is 26 years old. Until Drew Brees left, he didn't know anything of Saints except Sean Payton and Drew Brees. So, that's what you're used to. And I get it. And I'm not saying you should get used to mediocrity or whatever the hell this was this year. But at the same time, the sky's not falling. I just don't think, and I get the cap situation. It's $40-50 million worse than the next team. Understand all that, blah, 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 blah. But in the grand scheme of things, they got to get through this year, and it gets a whole lot better. Just saying. Chad says he agrees, especially in our division. John Carter says, close, just like Tiger fans forgetting the Curly Hallman season. What happened after Curly Hallman left? Things got better. You got Nick Saban. By no means am I saying Kellen Moore is going to be Nick Saban. But remember 20 years ago? Jerry DiNardo, he's right. It was Jerry DiNardo and then Nick Saban. You're right, Norm. But, you know, I'll just go back to January of 2006. Nobody knew who the hell Sean Payton was, okay? Let's get realistic. He wasn't the Saints' first choice either. And so people could have said that was a debacle coming off of a 3-13 season. Same situation where they held Jim Haslett way too long. And they went through Katrina, and that's the only reason why they even fired Jim Haslett is because they had to. They had to start over. I mean, Apathy says the Ditka days. You want to talk about debacle? Those days were super terrible. I'm just saying. Look, the Saints are in a tough situation. Are they going to be able to get out of it in a hurry? I don't know. It depends on what your definition is of a hurry. I mean, when you're older like me, you got less time to hope that you can see another Super Bowl. I'd love to see this city go through another, not the Super Bowl where I'm sitting here and 2 other cities are coming here and enjoying a Super Bowl. No, I want the Saints to go to a Super Bowl as much as you do. I mean, I don't want to, who wants to cover this garbage? Not me. Who wants to talk about this garbage every day for months and months and months? Not me. But I just don't think it's as bad as y'all do. Look, I'm going to finish the show with Saints with this. Something that Gabe went and cut out for me and we clipped up. And I do want to talk about, here's a happy story, all sort of. I don't know how many people saw the Senior Bowl and how it ended. And for those people who don't believe in fate and higher beings and I guess angels and souls and all those sorts of things, look, I'm a big believer in all that. I've had a lot of people close to me pass away over the last 5 years or so. My dad passed away. It'll be exactly 1 year tomorrow. And don't think I won't be thinking about him tomorrow. A younger sister passed away 5 years ago, and I think about her every day and feel her and talk to her every day. But I guess what I'm leading into, there's this clip that I want to run from the NFL Network that's been all over social media. And it's all I could think about was my dad and my sister and my mom passed away in January of 2006. No coincidence, right when the Saints rebirth was starting, right? That's when the Saints rebirth started in January 2006. The Saints won the NFC Championship game on her birthday, January 24th of 2010, and then won the Super Bowl on her mother's birthday on February 7th, 2010. So if you don't think I don't believe in these sorts of things, then you're crazy. But there was a moment this weekend in sports that kind of just brought it all together for me personally. And watching Jack Bash in the Senior Bowl and him scoring the winning touchdown. First of all, for him to make that play, quarterback could have gone in multiple directions, and he tossed it to Bash, who, when he caught the winning touchdown, I'm going to show it to you here again in a second from the NFL Network, and it just touched me when he went to one knee, and I can only imagine what he was thinking and thanking his brother Tiger, who had passed away in the tragic accident it wasn't an accident, it was an intentional malicious act. The tragedy of New Year's. Guess what? That was exactly 1 month from the day he scores the winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. Let's take a look about it.
Oh, last shot as the American team makes their move. Hennigan on the move. Looking. Yes. Got it. Jack Bash has his Mobile moment.
That's a walk-off.
And the American team swarms Jack Bash. Makes the game-winning touchdown catch.
If you don't believe, man, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, when he went to a knee there, I still get touched. Yep. Gabe showing us Callie's comment there everywhere. It was so moving. You know, I know so many people who don't believe in this stuff, and just there's too many coincidences. If if you're open to it and you feel it, and this is a sports show, so not trying to get deep here, but, I think about the people that are super close to me, and I feel them all the time. And, I grew up, and I got a love of sports from my grandfather, who passed away in 1995. And, it's been almost 30 years, and it still doesn't. Not many days go by when I don't think about him and thank him for instilling this love of sports. And I wish he were with me today and see where I am and what I'm doing. And I'm talking about sports to my Dattitude family here. So anyway, I thought that was pretty cool to shout out there. UBN, never realized my dad passed on his mom and dad's wedding anniversary. Yeah. 1 year ago tomorrow. I'm sure I'll bring it up tomorrow, so I hope y'all don't get too tired of it. Look, tomorrow we're going to be before we go to, I want to give another shout out to my friends at Evangeline Securities. We could not do this without them, and I know Nick Braden, I've been able to talk to him. He's become a friend, and I don't get to see him, but we do text each other a whole lot. We told you a little bit earlier. We'll let you know more about how Evangeline Securities can help you figure out what your privately held or family-run business might be worth and whether it's time to sell. Well, after their complimentary valuation of your company, if you decide to proceed, the aforementioned native New Orleanian Nick Braden and Ron Hemill and the folks at Evangeline will begin an extensive auction process from around the world. They will maximize the return process for the founder and his or her family. Evangeline Securities is the top producer on their platform. There are very few companies like them in this area, none with their dedication and success. They are fully licensed, ready to serve you, so get in touch with Nick and Ron about what's really important. It ain't the Super Bowl. It ain't the Saints. What is it, Gabe? It's the rest of your life. You can find them at www.evangelinesecurities.com. Again, a big shout out to my friend Nick Braden and the people at Evangeline Securities. Who Dat Daddy says his dad is the reason he's a Saints fan. He was in Tulane Stadium when Tom Dempsey kicked the 63-yard field goal. Let me tell you something, Who Dat Daddy. When I met my wife, again, I told you we just celebrated our wedding anniversary this past Saturday. Well, my wife at the time owned a local Italian restaurant, which is no longer in existence, thank God, because that was a really tough life for us in the beginning. But anyway, Tom Dempsey was a regular there. And his daughter, Ashley, worked there. And so I got to become friends with the Dempsey family after it was over. And maybe tomorrow I'll tell you, if you remind me, Who Dat, remind me tomorrow and I'll tell you a story about that kick and about my dad being there with my grandfather, them going to tomorrow. Remind me tomorrow and I will tell you on the anniversary of my dad's passing. It's a pretty cool story. Lance Dobard, good stuff, real stuff. Thanks for sharing. Absolutely. That's going to just about wrap it up for us here today. I want to thank my guest, Zach Ewing, came on. Look, I'm going to try to get people. I didn't really get a chance this morning to walk around and ask anybody to come on. I literally, by the time I finished parking, it was crazy getting down here. I walked up to our table, sat down with Zach. And then when Rod and Matthew came on later, and I was able to walk off, I had time basically to go upstairs and get a drink and get ready for our show. I hadn't even written anything, trying to get everything up. So maybe we'll have some other people come and sit down with us tomorrow. We'll see. I know, again, Adam Chernoff is going to be on tomorrow. I think he's on at 1:20. So Adam Chernoff will be the first guest tomorrow. We'll talk more about Super Bowl things. I'll probably have some video clips to show you. We'll see what Kellen Moore had to say. For sure. I'll have some clips of Kellen Moore and see how many times. Maybe I'll just stand there and I'll have a pad and mark off how many times he gets asked a question about the Saints. I agree wholeheartedly with Zach that he's going to come out and say, I just want y'all to know I can't talk about the Saints, but yet he will be proceeded to be asked about it. My over-under, I'm going to say 13.5. Okay? What you got? You got the over-under on that. I want to thank Zach. I want to thank Gabe for being in the background, for coming on the show. We hope you can join us tomorrow, a rare Tuesday episode of the Dattitude Podcast. Same time, 1 p.m. live on these same social media channels. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you go subscribe to the Dattitude YouTube page. That's where the Dattitude family lives. You can also click the little bell to get notifications when we're going on the air live. Yeah, so that's where we want you to go. If you haven't been there already, you can find us wherever you get your podcast, including Apple, Spotify, many more. You can also find a replay of the show always on NOLA.com/sports. What else did I want to say? Oh, yeah, bet.NOLA.com. Check us out there. And the Insiders, again, they will be on 9 a.m. tomorrow, 9 a.m. till about 11:30 or 12, somewhere around there. Well, playing it by ear as well. They'll be here every morning the rest of the week at 9 a.m. I'll be here certainly tomorrow and Wednesday at 1 p.m. We'll see what happens on Thursday, and then Friday again, I'll probably be back at the home studio. So until tomorrow, everybody, thank you for joining us, and take it easy, my friends.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.